Hey guys. So my name is Aaron. I work for Fullscreen, which is based in Southern California. I have a really cool job. I am a director of happiness. And that sounds like a really cushy job, and it kind of is, but it's also really challenging too. My job is to optimize the engineering team at Fullscreen to make sure that everyone is as happy as possible and make sure that Fullscreen is as awesome a place to work as possible. If you've never heard of Fullscreen before, you're not alone. We're kind of a quiet company, but we actually have a pretty big presence. If you don't know what we do, we're a media company. We are primarily on YouTube, and we're actually a very large YouTube network. So we have tens of thousands of channels that we represent. I think the count is over 30,000 last time I checked. And if you don't know any of these channels, and that makes you feel really old, you're not alone. I feel really old too. Try going to VidCon sometime. Everyone there is like 14. I'm like, where are your parents? Our network is huge. We have over 300 million subscribers across all our channels. It just blows my mind to think about that. And we accrue every month over 3 billion monthly views. But we're a startup. Like we started from humble beginnings, just like any other startup. This is our CEO, George. I think this photo was taken about 3 years ago. We just celebrated our 3rd birthday a couple weeks ago, actually. So how do you get from this to what we have now, which is almost 200 people? We had to grow using technology, and George saw that immediately, so he hired Drew, my roommate, and our founding engineer. Look at that baby face. So we started to grow, and the engineering team started to grow pretty quickly. And this is Fullscreen's headcount. This is pretty rapid growth, especially when you factor in that we're all sharing a single bathroom in an office. So we started to kind of feel the pain of growing. And I know those are like really premium problems to have. Like this is a first world problem like in the first degree. But growing is really hard, especially in an engineering team. Our product dashboard looks like this, or it looked like this. And it was kind of command central for Fullscreen. It's responsible for a lot of stuff. It makes sure all the money coming in and going out is correct. It makes sure everyone gets paid correctly. Make sure everyone knows exactly what the splits are when they're doing that. When you're doing that with tens of thousands of channels, that's a lot of work. It's a lot of contracts to manage. I was kind of looking around at like all the different roles that this app had to play, and it's a lot. Like, I call it a Yamaha app because it just does like so many different like things that are sometimes completely unrelated. And I'm trying to get that term going around. So if you guys want to like use that when you see an app that's doing a lot of things, like really help me out here. So from early on, we were really scrappy. So when the business demanded something, we would do it. We added a lot of features to Dashboard really quickly, and that really caught up with us, as you might know if you've ever done something like that. We started seeing just errors in general because we were struggling to scale. It was starting to make us panic a little bit. We knew that we had to change something. So our team got together. This is in 2012. It's amazing to think it's so long ago. And we just started to talk about our issues with Dashboard. And we kind of aired our grievances. We talked about all the mistakes that we made, using MongoDB as your main data store for stuff that it wasn't appropriate for. I'm not against MongoDB or anything, but you know, it wasn't a good choice at that time. We talked about what we did wrong, things that we wanted to do with Dashboard later, and we came to the conclusion we needed to do the big rewrite. So, you know, we knew this kind of doesn't really work, but maybe it's going to work for us because, you know, I think we thought we knew all the right things. So we kind of got together, we talked about it, we knew what we wanted to do. We didn't necessarily know how we were going to do it, but we left that meeting feeling pretty good. And then nothing happened for several months because we were still dealing with putting out fires all the time. So that was happening. We didn't necessarily have a game plan for how we were going to architect this new product. And so the team was kind of working in kind of a dysfunctional way still. The leaders of the engineering team got together again, and we actually started talking about the approach. So we landed on a service-oriented architecture, which is a great idea. That's what Amazon does. You know, I figured they know this stuff. So we kind of had an idea of how this was going to work. We were going to break Dashboard up into a series of small services, each of which was responsible for a little tiny thing. And we had that kind of game approach, but we didn't necessarily know how we were going to transition away from it, how we were going to get the existing app to be moved over to all that stuff. We still knew what we were going to do, so we knew what we were going to build. So people started building things. We were still supporting our existing apps, but new stuff was getting built as well. But a few months passed by, and still, it was not looking like we were going to ever really hit the time when we were going to be using Dashboard 2.0. Bets were being made with accounting on whether we'd hit those dates and whether we'd keep those promises, and that's never really good. And we weren't winning those bets either. I was becoming really alarmed because our team was bigger than ever before, but we were still shipping stuff pretty slowly. And we had to do something to change. And the change came in the form of a blessing and a curse. So we were getting increasing demands from the business, and instead of just giving kind of a thumbs up, like, hey, we can do this, we were kind of actually really starting to get a little bit panicked because adding all this stuff was getting really hard. We had to make a change, and the thing that kind of called for it was something that you should never agree to, but we agreed to do a deadline. Our CEO kind of sat us all down, and we talked about it, and we decided June 15th, 2013, that's going to be when we ship this new thing. And we were like, yeah, that's cool. That's far enough off in the future that I feel like we can do a bunch of stuff in that time. And I'll bet things can just kind of come together. And that's not really the best idea in the world, but it worked. It's what we had. And to give you an idea of like how well we thought out that date, June 15th was a Sunday. So like that definitely wasn't going to happen. But something really miraculous happened after this. We, at this time, also reorged our team, and at that point, I became a director of engineering, and a couple of other people on our team became directors, and the three of us at the time were basically kind of running the engineering team. We didn't have a head at the time. Our CEO was basically serving as that, and he was non-technical. But we started making some changes. And the specific changes, I'm not going to really go into much detail because it makes for a really shitty story, but our thinking changed. The way we approached how we worked with our team started to really change, and that created a lot of really great changes. And we did ship. We shipped something called the Creator Platform in June of 2013. It was our biggest launch to date. It was so cool to see that. Like, it launched in such a sane way. And compared to other things we had shipped before, like, I would be like deploying stuff to Heroku late at night, and then I'd be there really late fixing all the stuff I realized I just broke, and then I'd spend the next week like not doing anything because I'm busy fixing all the other things that I broke that I just discovered that were broken. But we work a lot differently now. There's not so much stress with the way we work. We ship before the days we commit to, which is just insane. Deploys are very stress-free. We deploy and it's fine. We have a real QA team now, which I think is fantastic. I really recommend it. Even if you feel like you're too small for one, you get a lot of bang for your buck by adding people that are just checking these things out. We can actually do our launches in a more proper way. We can stagger them. We can schedule them correctly. We can actually roll them out gradually to users. And these are things we just weren't thinking about before. And as we started doing this, our executive team started actually having faith in us again because we were able to work to the beat of our own drum. That gives you autonomy, and that's really important to have. We refactored our team. This is what happened. And we're not done refactoring our team. We are constantly doing that. So how do you refactor a team? When you refactor code, you have to have a test suite, right? Because if you don't, then you're not actually refactoring. You're just changing a bunch of shit, and you don't know if you actually broke anything or not. So how do you have unit tests for people? You can't use RSpec, can you? That just wouldn't really work. I wish it would, because that'd make my job a lot easier. You could do surveys, maybe? But I don't know. Like, I fill out surveys. I don't really fill out surveys because they're really tedious, and they just end up looking like something like that. There's a lot of discrete stuff you can look at. Like, you can measure your ship times. You can measure like how early you ship. You can watch your velocity and make sure that it stays pretty consistent. You can look and see if people are working late, see if they're burning midnight oil. Like, those are all easy things to watch, and those are good metrics to watch if you want to make sure you're successful. But you ultimately really need humans to be telling you what you need to know. Your team are your eyes and ears. You can't necessarily see everything, so you need to be getting candid feedback from them. If you're a really small team, you probably already get really candid feedback. But if your team grew really rapidly, like ours did, you might find yourself at a point where that growth resulted in a situation where maybe you're not having those conversations with everyone anymore. Maybe some people kind of got slipped under, they started falling between the cracks. A lot of people just don't leave feedback at all. They just don't tell you anything. Or like when you go ask them, they'll say, oh yeah, everything's fine. Some people will give it to you, but they're just kind of really timid about it. Maybe they'll walk into your office, they'll have like a bunch of notes prepared. They're like, yeah, everything's really great. You know, I really love the team. By the way, it's a really criminally inefficient. And I'll talk to you later. Bye. But like what you really want to get is to a point where you can just have conversations with people. You just want to have conversations with all your team members, and you want to just be straight up with them, and they'll be straight up with you, and you got a great conversation going on. That is fantastic. Like if you can get to that point, you are in a very good place. If you're not at that point yet, watch some of your behaviors. When you get feedback from people, are you engaging in some anti-patterns? Like I bet this has happened to you. Like maybe you've gone to your boss and you had a really good idea, and they're like, oh my God, thank you so much. This is so great that we're getting feedback. And you can just tell they're not going to do shit about that. Like nothing's going to change. And if you ever work for a big corporation, like you probably know how that feels. Don't do that. Like give honest feedback about the feedback. Another one, like a more passive-aggressive approach, is like you have an idea and you have a really great way to do something better, and you share it with your boss. They're like, yeah, well, you know, this is how we currently do things. And that is so incredibly arrogant to think that you're doing something so right that if someone thinks they have a better idea, it's not that they really do, it's just they don't understand it well enough. Like, you guys are all great, but like, I don't think any of you are doing anything so well that you can't look and maybe get an idea of how to do something better. Like, I mean, I don't know all you guys personally, but like, I'm sure there's something, everything can be improved somewhat. Another big one, especially when teams get big and everyone gets busy, is the I can't response. Try to avoid this one. Don't say I can't do something when what you really mean is I won't do something. It's just dishonest. If you won't do something because it's unfeasible, just say that. I think if I give someone feedback and they tell me they can't do it, I'd rather just hear why. And you'll get better feedback that way. You have to really demonstrate to people that their feedback is useful to you. You can't just simply say it is. Like, you don't get put on hold with an airline and get told that your call is really valuable to them, and you're like, oh, man, that feels good. I was really relieved. Worried you guys didn't value my call after being put on hold for 30 minutes. So one really easy way to show people that their feedback is really useful is by actually doing something. Like, there is so much stuff that you can try that you've probably just been putting off. Just fucking try it. Like, you will probably not destroy your team. Like, there's probably no change that I can think of that you're going to make that someone suggests to you that's going to cause your team to fall apart, your business to lose money, your spouse to leave you. Like, this is disastrous. Like, if I can manage to run a team and not have that happen, I think that, like, there's no suggestion you might like take that's going to cause that to happen. So just try things. Like, that's really easy to do. It's not going to work 100% of the time. Sometimes you're just going to get really bad suggestions. And you got to address those. If it's a bad suggestion, just say it. Just like say, no, I know this is a bad idea. Explain. If you can demonstrate that you actually really thought through what they said and you're not just giving a knee-jerk response, that feels better. Like, I mean, it's not as good as like having your feedback listened to and having a change being made because of it, but if you can actually like have a real conversation about it and not just like have it go off into ether, I think people feel better that way. Another way to show that you are actually really interested is by asking a lot of questions. If you're maybe hearing some suggestion and you're kind of like, oh, I don't know about this. This kind of sounds weird, but you don't really know enough to really say why. Well, you're not really in a position to have a stance on the issue, are you? So start asking questions. If you don't know, if you can't make a decision about something, go and research it. Just go find out. Like, ask other people questions. There's plenty of resources out there. And if you try these things, maybe you're going to be surprised and you're going to find that someone had a really great suggestion and you didn't even know that it was going to be a great idea, but you went and found out and it's great. So that's a really good framework for making sure that the feedback you're getting is valuable. And it's a lot of work to get to that point. Like, it takes a lot of time to build that trust with your team. At Fullscreen, we use a tool called Know Your Company. It's made by what used to be 37 Signals. They're actually their own company now. Know Your Company is really great. Every week, it basically sends out emails asking questions to the entire team about random things. It'll ask things like, what are you working on? It'll ask things like just gauging your opinion about the company in general. And it'll also ask people just social questions and questions to get to know each other better. And then these answers are shared with the entire team. It's a really great way to get to know people. It's important that you ask the right questions, though. Here's an example question that we asked using Know Your Company last week. I wanted to make sure that everyone understood that our goals for 2014 were clear. And I got some really great answers for it. And these answers lead to very easy action items. They can start a conversation. And I know exactly what I need to do to make a change. We also asked recently if anyone had any good recipes to share. And I got a really fantastic recipe for rat poison. So if you guys want a non-toxic rat poison recipe, just hit me up and I'll let you know. There are lots of general questions that you can ask, like what can we improve on? And those are really not that great. I'm not a fan of these. They're too generic. You probably won't get responses at all sometimes. They'll be like, oh, no, we're fine. Try going more specific. Try something like, what's a change that Fullscreen could make at no cost that would make you happier? That's still pretty general. Like you can get a lot of answers that way, but it's directed enough that like really makes someone think about their answer. People weren't necessarily expecting to hear that question either, so it really makes them think. Another one that I asked that I really liked, I asked these at all my performance reviews last week. I asked people if they were offered any job and they were going to leave Fullscreen for it, what would that job be? I got some really fantastic answers, and it taught me some really great things about my team. I learned that a lot of my team members are really entrepreneurial, and they would like to start their own company someday. That's really great to know. I learned that some of my team members really like certain technologies. So if I can offer them more opportunities to work with those new technologies, they're going to be happier. If you can learn things like that about your team, like that can help put you in a position where you can make them really happy. If you're at a point now where you can get really good feedback about things, you can really move fast and break shit. And you do this with your software probably. If you're working in a really agile way, you just move, you try things that are new. You have to be prepared to fail, though. You have to be prepared that not everything you're going to do is a slam dunk. So you're going to fail, but you got to be sure to fail really cheaply. If you have an idea for something you want to try, don't just try it necessarily with the entire company. Try it with maybe a subset first, just to see if it's going to work. If it looks like it's catching on, cool. Keep working on that. If it doesn't, stop doing that and figure out what you need to adjust so you can learn lessons along the way. At Fullscreen, our VP of Design and Research came back from a conference a couple months ago, and he had this really great idea for something called design sprints. It wasn't really an idea, he heard about it. Google Ventures does this. It's basically a one-week exercise with a new project where you do user research and you have really good conversations about what you want your product to do and what problems you want your product to solve. You put together wireframes, figure out what you like about them, and figure out ones that you want to build a prototype of. You build a really cheap prototype of it using Keynote. You don't even write any code. And then you bring in people, real people, to actually give feedback on those prototypes and watch them struggle with it and do the actual user testing with it. This all happens within 1 week. So it's a very rapid way to kind of do a lot of product discovery at once. And he wanted to try it with our team. So we did. We tried it that very next week. We didn't try it with everything, because that would be a lot of work, and it's more risky that way. So we tried it with a single project. And it was an incredible success. I felt really inspired that week because the conversations we were having were fantastic. We got really great user data. And the best part was it was really cheap to do this. If this was a total failure, we lost maybe a week's worth of work with just a few people. And that's not totally cheap, but that's not the end of the world. That's not like bringing down the company. It's just something we tried and we could have moved on. But the upside is it didn't fail. It was really successful, and now we actually do that with all of our new projects. So it was a really great success. Not everything we do is that successful, though. I had a great idea once to do our retrospectives and have demos of everything that was developed be demoed during the retro. People hated it. I could have predicted that probably, but I just wanted to try it anyway. People did hate it, so I acquiesced, and we don't do that anymore. So I had to kind of deal with that reality. But I really like the idea of demos. So we actually tried something a little bit different with it. Every month our team gets together, and now we do demos of the pillar features that we developed that week, or that month. That's really cool, because we're a really big team. We ship a lot of stuff every month, so it's really cool to kind of see what others are up to, and just kind of make sure you have a good idea of all the things that we ship that month, because we're pretty awesome. When you start working like this, you're going to notice like a cultural shift in the way your company works. People aren't going to be sitting at the water cooler being like, man, the way we do our planning really sucks. And they're just like, yeah, that does suck, doesn't it? Instead, people are going to say, man, this really sucks. They'll be, yeah, what can we do about this? Let's try something immediately. That's a great cultural shift. That makes people happy. It makes me happy to know that if there's something I don't like, I can just go change it immediately. And I want everyone on my team to feel that empowered. We have a motto at Fullscreen: it's easier to ask forgiveness and permission. I think we stole it from Grace Hopper, but it's been working well for us. And we take that really seriously. I ripped a bunch of desks out of my office because we needed the space, and I didn't get permission. But it was like a 10-second awkward conversation with an operations guy, basically saying, yeah, you shouldn't have done that. But whatever. It was really easy to ask for forgiveness. And I tried it, and it worked. So I got the job done. But creating something that's centered around happiness is that's what I'm about. That's the kind of team I want to be building. We're all Rubyists here. Most of us are. Ruby is optimized to make engineers happy at the expense of almost everything else. It wants us to be happy as engineers. Everything is really intuitive. There's no boilerplate. And as a result of that, Rubyists have really high standards for everything. We do best practices all the time because best practices make us happy. If I talk to a Rubyist, I can just take for granted that they're using source control. They're probably using really good source control like Git. I can assume that they have a test suite on their application. If they have a web application, I can assume it's 12-factor or close to it. They probably use GitHub. They're probably using a CI tool like Travis. We levitate towards these things because they're the right thing to do. And we like to do the right thing because it makes us happy. What if we felt that way about our workplace too? What if our workplace was not above this sort of approach? We do that at Fullscreen. We use lots of stuff. We love having fun. We have lots of perks. We really value learning. But we also make ourselves a place where people can actually make changes when they need to. We're very fluid. And I think that makes people really happy. I believe that being happy with your job is something that you should feel almost entitled to. And I believe that not just because I'm biased and I want to have a job that I like, but I believe that because I do my best work when I feel like there's meaning to the work I do. And I think that's better for business. Our employers have an incredible amount of control over our lives, if you ever think about it. They determine basically most of our income, if not all of it. They determine where we live, unless we're remote. They account for almost all of our waking hours during the week, either by commuting or being at work. And they control the environment that you work in, too. And when you have control over all those things, that gives your employer tacit control over whether you're happy. And I believe that we need to make sure that employers are invested in people's happiness. I think everyone should have a director of happiness at their employer because when you look at things like this, you're going to run better as a team. If you're interested in learning more, I think that you're part of probably lots of growing startups. Maybe some of you may become managers yourselves. I'm not an expert, as you can kind of probably tell. And it's actually really good. I'm not burdened with having to be an expert at things. I'm not burdened with having to know things and having to make the right decision all the time. I have a lot of humility in the way I work, and I just change things when things are going wrong. If you want a kind of a crash course in the world of management, I recommend Managing Humans by Michael Lopp. It's a really good engineering-driven approach to how to do management. It just helps you get to know the world of business and understanding why things are the way they are in many ways. If you're interested in learning more about our user design testing labs that we've built, our VP of product design has put together a series of blog posts about it. I'm going to post these links on my Twitter account as well so they're clickable. If you guys have any questions, you can hit me up on Twitter. But other than that, thank you guys. Do you guys have any questions? Go ahead.
So what is your team structure at Fullscreen? You mentioned that you're a director and you have 2 other directors. How
Yep.
are the team structured?
So our org chart is very flat. There are engineers, there are directors, and there's the VP of engineering. From day to day, our teams are differently structured. We have a series of pipelines which are all kind of just like independent units that kind of have their own sprint planning meetings. They work kind of just independently of one another. Those aren't necessarily tied to the directors. We're probably going to connect them a little bit more later, but for right now, we organize our org chart based on who's a good supervisor, based on like your career path, and who would be a good mentor for each person. And so we think about that. Yep.
Out of curiosity, what does the floor plan of your office look like? Is it open, or does everyone have their own office?
It is bursting at the seams because we're growing a lot and it's very hard to find space. We've been kind of just cramming people in. We're generally organized by the role people have. So designers tend to be with other designers. Product managers are usually with other product managers. But we aren't necessarily, we have a lot of nooks and crannies in our current office. So we've got like one really big open space that has a lot of engineers in it. We've got a couple other areas that have some engineers. And we try to have some open space as well. We keep growing and we're going to eventually get bigger space, and it's a goal of mine to optimize that to make sure that there's a space that people can go to, like if they want to have a quiet area to work. Sometimes people want to work in an open area. Sometimes people want to go pair together. So I want to make sure all those things are accommodated and that there's enough extra space that can work. Yep.
So what kind of methodology are you guys using? It sounds like you're doing Scrum or some Agile. Does that really come into play? Because I know when we do, our retrospectives after each sprint, we go through the whole feedback loop, and it's usually pretty good.
We don't use any particular Agile methodology. It's kind of one that we baked ourselves based on our own needs. We work in single week iterations. At the beginning of each week, we'll plan the iteration out and we'll plan what stories we're going to do. We'll have the retro at the end of the week to basically just kind of go over what stories were done to make sure that if there's any changes that need to be made, we can react to that. We can talk to stakeholders and just kind of like talk with each other about things.
Do you do regular feedback during those retrospectives about everything, including the team environment?
Yep. We basically just we put topics up on the board at the beginning, and then we'll kind of just discuss them and we'll figure out changes to make based on that. Any other questions? All right, thanks, guys.